Let's talk about Vynnset. Vynnset is a new Shadow Runeblade released with Dusk Till Dawn. She is the first Shadow Runeblade after Chane went Living Legend. I do not think she's a replacement for Chane, but she does have the Shadow talent or keyword allowing her to play all the Shadow cards. Today I want to talk about her core deck. What cards can you include? What cards will probably be strong, and what's the first build I am looking at? So starting off, I want to talk about her hero ability. It reads as follows: at the start of your turn, banish a card from your hand. If you do, create a rune chant. It's not a May, so you must banish a card from your hand, but you do get a rune chant in return. And the second ability, which does feel less relevant: whenever you play a Shadow non-attack action, you may pay 1 life. If you do, the next rune chant effect that would deal damage this turn can't be prevented. The can't be prevented is a very strong effect against, for example, Prism, who will run some ward. Angels will be ward, Spectral Shields will be ward, so if you can play the Shadow non-attack and pay the life against the Prism, you will trigger all the wards and still do the 1 damage, which is strong. And you can use it for something like a Deadly Delight, gaining, and well, not losing a life, doing 1 extra damage with the arcane from the rune chant, or with the Deadly Wail being able to generate 2 rune chants instead of 1 if you are able to damage your opponent as well, which does fuel the engine. The first part of the hero ability, or the hero text, at the start of your turn, banish a card from your hand. If you do, create a rune chant, is, in my opinion, stronger than it looks at first hand. And it's not rune chant, but it's actually another keyword that makes it very strong, which is Runegate. Runegate is a very strong keyword for Vynnset. It allows her to basically attack for free, because if you banish a card with her hero ability, generating a rune chant, and for example pitching a blue into the Grasp of the Arknight, generating a second rune chant, which you still haven't played a card, you've only generated rune chants, you're able to attack with the Widespread Ruin for free. So if you have 1 rune chant beforehand and you banish the Widespread Ruin with the Vynnset ability, you can generate the second rune chant and use the Widespread Ruin for free. So you can attack with a 1 card hand, and it's a 1 card hand for 8, which, if you remember Oldham going 2 cards 8 or 2 cards 7, this is 1 card 8, which is very strong. So for the equipment, I've chosen for the Crown of Providence to cycle away the Arsenal. I feel like the Arsenal is very important in Vynnset to set up bigger turns. So maybe you want to Arsenal on a Mauvrion Skies or a Funeral Moon or a Pummel or a Read the Runes to set up a bigger turn. And sometimes you just cannot get the tempo to, or don't get the hands to play out the big combo line, and you need to cycle away the card because it's basically just dead in the water, so you can ground away that card, which can be strong. It's also just a 2 block, but I do feel like Arknight Skullcap also has a place in Vynnset, because you generally want to be defending more than maybe the standard deck, because you utilize 1 or 2 card hands very efficiently. I chose the Flail because it attacks for 1, which is actually really annoying. It also generates the rune chant, and it doesn't cost a resource. And that's the general theme of this deck, being resourceless, which is the general theme of this deck. I do run a Tunic. It's quite specifically for Spellbound Creepers, so you can use the Spellbound Creepers for free in a big Revel in Moonblood turn. Maybe you could use it for a Grasp of the Arknight with the blue if you have 2 rune chants. Or if you're going to play Envelop in Darkness, you can use it for the Envelop in Darkness for free. Maybe it's a sideboard card and you would run the Dyadic Carapace, which is also a very good card, and I currently have in the sideboard, but it needs some testing which one would be the main board equipment. Because I do feel having the Tunic resource can be nice, especially with the Pummel as well, where you can maybe even just pitch a blue for the CNC if you're running the CNC and have the one resource for the Pummel. Next up is Grasp of the Arknight. It's a very easy way to generate the second rune chant you need for Runegate 2 attacks. You can just pitch a blue into the Grasp of the Arknight to generate the second rune chant and have the Runegate attack active from the banished zone. It also has a block 2 and battle worn, so you can block with it twice and still have the effect of the grasp, which makes it a staple as a Runeblade, and it also allows you to have to block 2 breakpoints. Next up is the Grimoire. Last but definitely not least, Spellbound Creepers. It's a equipment with a lot of text, so you can use it once per turn as an instant, and you can only activate it if you have attacked or defended with an attack action card. If you activate the Spellbound Creepers, you will have to put a bind counter on the Spellbound Creepers. So let's say we use the Spellbound Creepers right now, we have to put down 1 bind counter. In return for the bind counter, we get to play our next non-attack action card this turn as though it were an instant. Do note that it still is an action. For example, as a red in the ledger, it doesn't change the action, but it changes when you can play it. And you generally use this effect, playing it as an instant, in response to your own attack. So let's say we attack with a Deadly Delight, this card, and we don't have go again. We can in the reaction step use the Spellbound Creepers, allowing us to play, for example, the Revel in Runeblood, which we do need to have played a non-attack action as well, but we can play the Revel in Runeblood, and because Revel in Runeblood says it has go again, you actually get an action point after resolving the combat chain. So although Deadly Delight doesn't have go again, if you Spellbound Creepers in the Revel in Runeblood, which does have to go again, you get an action point allowing you to attack again, although you don't have go again. This gives you the bind counter, and it also puts the Spellbound Creepers on the clock, basically. Because at the last line of text, at the beginning of your end phase, destroy Spellbound Creepers unless you have dealt arcane damage this turn equal to or greater than the number of bind counters on Spellbound Creepers. So the moment you use it, you will have to always do 1 arcane damage to keep them around. And if you use them again, you put on another bind counter, so you have 2 bind counters. You will have to be doing 2 arcane damage each turn to keep up the Spellbound Creepers. So generally, you want to use it once or twice, back to back if you can, because consistently doing arcane damage can be really hard, and if you cannot, you will lose the 1 block as well. So you could technically use them and block with them the next turn, so you don't lose the value of the block. Let's talk about the cards. This deck is built around Runegate, and Runegate allowing us to cheat out big attacks from the banished zone without having to pay for them is a very strong concept that I want to explore in this deck. So I am pairing a lot of Runegate attacks with ways to generate rune chants and some more defensive options. Let's start off at the top left. We have Deadly Delight. You have a few options when choosing Runegate cards. For the first and most important option is how much Runegate can you pay and what's the effect of the card. So Deadly Delight is a 2-cost card, so you need to generate 2 rune chants for you to be able to play it from the banished zone for free, and it has the extra effect of hopefully gaining you 1 life if it hits. And although it attacks for 5, it's actually a 2 card or 1 card 7 if you have 1 rune chant from any source from Vynnset. It's a 1 card 7, and if you value the life gain, it's actually a 1 card 8. So it feels like a fine 2 for 8 card. The second Runegate card I actually run in red and in blue is a Deathly Wail. Deathly Wail It costs 3, which can be a little bit tricky to achieve, but we have certain ways to get there, and maybe even some easy ways to get there. And the main reason I feel Deathly Wail is a strong card is because it generates rune chance on the attack, or actually when the combat chain closes. So you will have generated 3 rune chance to be able to play the Deathly Wail. So they will have to pitch a blue or pitch multiple cards to prevent the rune chance from hitting, as well as blocking out the 6 from the Deathly Wail. And if they don't, you always get the rune chant back. And getting the rune chant back has a lot of value because it makes it much easier for you to keep looping the Runegate attacks, keep applying the pressure. One of the ways to cheat out an extra rune chant is Funeral Moon. I feel like this is a card that looks boring, but in playtesting I loved it because it's just a free way to get an extra rune chant, which, although it seems quite boring, is actually very useful because getting 2 is doable, but getting 3 and even 4 can be a bit rough, and Funeral Rune does help you get there. Generally you do want to play it from your arsenal, so you arsenal it and then you can play it in their turn when you take some damage, or from the banished zone. But personally I feel like Blood Depth is not a thing you want to actively maintain, so keeping a Funeral Moon in Blood Depth multiple turns can be a bit rough. So I personally feel like it's a very good arsenal card to fuel your next turn with 1 extra rune chant. Up next is Mauvrion Skies. It's a very strong card, gives the next card Go Again, next Runeblade attack Go Again, and the 3 rune chants on hit. It probably won't hit, but if it does hit, you can just go Runegate 2 into Runegate 3, or Runegate 2 into Runegate 4 if you play out the Funeral Moon with the red Mauvrion Skies, of course. And it's just a way to extend the turn, because you will be playing 1 attack most of the time. There's not a lot of Go Again in the deck, and being able to attack, threaten the 3 rune chants on hit, and be able to attack with the flail, which just attacks for 1 but generates the 1 rune chant you need to fuel the next turn, is a perfect play pattern. Talking about perfect play patterns, Pummel. If you get to keep a 4-card hand, you will generally do a few things. You will banish a Runegate attack. Let's say you banish a 2-cost Runegate attack, then you will have maybe a red Pummel in arsenal or in your hand, and 2 blues, or even a blue and a yellow. You can pitch 1 blue into the Grasp of the Arcanite, generating the 2nd rune chant to attack with the Runegate 2 card, and attack with the rune chant, the Runegate card, and still have 2 cards in hand to threaten the Pummel. All of the Runegate cards costs 2 or more, so Pummel does feel like a natural include because it has the discard, it has the 4 extra damage, and we also run Command and Conquers in the sideboard, so pairing it up with the Command and Conquer and the Tunic is devastating. Talking about devastating cards, Read the Runes. It generates 3 rune chants, and you have 2 ways to use it. You can use it after you've generated an Eloquence token. Eloquence token gives Go Again to the next non-attack action, or you can play it after you've played a Runegate attack Go Again. So if you go Mauvrion Skies into a Runegate, you can finish the turn off with the Read the Runes, generating 3 rune chants, and on the start of your turn getting the 4th for a Runegate 4 attack if you would like. Because we constantly want to generate and keep up rune chants to pay for Runegate. Reduce to rune chant feels like a very good card. It allows you to block for 4 instead of for 3, which is always nice. It's just a defense reaction, but it also generating a rune chant can help you get to the 3 you need, for example the Deathly Wail or the Widespread Destruction, which is why you run it. With Read the Runes we talked about Eloquence tokens. Requiem for the Damned is a way to generate those Eloquence tokens. It allows you to play the next non-attack action with Go Again, and it being you Having the possibility to play it as an instant on your opponent's turn, also playing it from Blood Depth, makes it a very flexible card. I'm not sure if you should run 3, but I will start off testing with 3 because you want to pair it with the Read Runes, and having one floating is fine, but if you're going to play a Mauvrion Skies, it will use up the Eloquence, so it can be a bit of a dead card, but you also need some cards to block with. And I feel like Requiem is also a card that's fine to block with. You probably don't need 3 Eloquence tokens in the game. So you run 3, but maybe if you want to find a place to add some other cards, maybe cutting 1 or even 2 can be something to look at. One card I wouldn't cut is Revel in Runeblood. It's a staple for Runeblades, especially paired with the Spellbound Creepers, allowing you to generate 4 rune chants after you've attacked, gaining Go Again, allowing you to play any Runegate attack you want, is just very, very strong. Rune chant generation is very important when playing Vynnset, and Runeblood Incantation generates 1 every single turn for 3 turns. It's the only card besides Pummel that has a cost, if you don't count the cost for the Runegate cards, but I do feel like it's worth it. We do run the Tunic, so you can play the Runeblood Incantation of the Tunic. Maybe if you don't have to attack or you're starting first, you can also pitch a card into the Runeblood Incantation. Setting those up can be very important in reaching those breakpoints for the 3 and 4 Runegate attacks. I am running Runic Reckoning. It's always free, because you will always generate the rune chant at the start of the turn, which is nice. It makes an attack bigger, which is also nice, so 0 for 3. It's one of the only ways to pump an attack in the deck, because Mauvrion Skies gives it Go Again but doesn't make it bigger. Runic Reckoning makes it bigger. So let's say you have 1 rune chant, you banish a Runegate, you can play this, you have a 2-card 11. It also blocks for 3, which is nice, so I do feel like it's an okay card. If you are looking to cut cards for maybe defense reactions or something, maybe this is a place to look as well, because although it is nice, it's more of a bonus. It does feel like a win more card, so it probably needs some more testing, but I'm running it because it plus 3, 0, blocks for 3. Although there's no special thing about Phantom Wraith, it's a 2-cost Runegate attack, and generally without any special shenanigans you will most easily get up to 2 rune chants. So having a way to use those 2 rune chants in an attack is very important to pressure your opponent to keep up to 0-card 8 basically, or the 2-card 8. And Phantom Wraith is one of the only 2 costs. You have the Phantom Wraith, you have the Deadly Delight, which attacks for 1 less, and you have the Widespread Ruin. And I feel like Phantom Wraith is better than Deadly Delight, because Deadly Delight in yellow attacks for 4. This just attacks for 6 in red and 5 in yellow, so it's just 1 more damage. You don't have to life gain, but I feel pressure has more value than the 1 life gain, the 1 situational life gain actually, because if you don't hit with anything, it's just a 4 or 3 or 5 attack, and this is always a 6, a 5 or a 4. It's unconditional, which makes it a staple, at least for the way I've built Vynnset. Then we get to the widespread cards. It's one of the reasons I'm playing Vynnset is because I love the art of these cards, but also the Runegate effect and the fact that it has a 2-sidedness to it. So all the widespread cards, so the widespread rune, destruction and annihilation, have the same clause where each hero that has lost a life this turn has to banish something. And this one, the banish from the top of your deck, isn't very beneficial. So generally you don't want to use it on yourself. In the way I've built this deck, you don't want to use any of the effects on yourself, so you don't want to lose a life with the second ability from Vynnset. But I could see a world where if you want to go more of a wide Vynnset kind of build, you could actually use this one to be beneficial for you as well, allowing you to banish the top card of your deck, which can be a blood depth card, allowing you to have another card to use to attack with. Second one is Widespread Destruction. So this one costs 3, but it also increases the effect of the banish. This one targeting the arsenal, which can be really useful against, for example, the rangers, other decks that care about the arsenal. Maybe there's also a reason to side this out against decks that generally don't use the arsenal, that want to use their entire hand most of the time. Maybe you board this out against a Icelander, for example, because this generally won't hit, and then it's just a Runegate for 6. And Deathly Wail is better than this one if the effect doesn't happen. But yeah, that's something to think about. Before going to the last widespread, we have one more card, which is Putrid Stirrings. I've included this one because it's blue, it blocks for 3, and it still has some value if you banish it. So in the end game, you might not want to banish all your attacks anymore, because maybe they're blue and you have a red in the banish zone, and you have a lot of blues left over. Being able to convert the blue into the Putrid Stirrings and still being able to Runegate an attack feels like it's kind of okay. It's also just there to have a 3 block, and another option is a Deadly Delight, which basically does the same. Another option is Deadly Delight, which you could also probably run. It's also 3 block blue. You can also go for Vexing Malice. I want to try out this one because it still has some value from the banished zone. And the last one, Widespread Annihilation. I feel like one of the coolest arts in a card. Maybe because of the pink and the green, purple and the blue, it just looks awesome. Anyways, it's the strongest of the widespread cards. You do need to get 4 rune chance to Runegate this attack, but it also means that if your opponent loses a life, they have to banish a card from their hand, and it costing 4 rune chance to Runegate means they will have to probably pitch away 2 cards to prevent any rune chant from hitting, and also have to block with 2 cards to prevent this card from hitting. So it does feel like a very strong card against. It does feel like a very strong card in most situations, because you're generating so much tempo. You have to block out rune chants, or if you don't, you just take 4 from the rune chants, you banish a card, you have to banish a card, you maybe even take 6, or you block 2, so you'll generally be left with either 1 or 2 cards just off this attack. And in your biggest turn, you can do for example, a Phantom Wraith, Revel in Moonblood into this one, which is a very, very strong turn to set up. And I feel like it's one of the tempo generating plays. So just to zoom in a little bit about Flesh and Blood's core mechanics, I feel like most decks, if you are deck building, you want to build a turn or a turn sequence or a combination of cards that you want to take damage for, but can take the tempo from your opponent. And Widespread Annihilation for me is one of those cards that if you can get it off with a Revel before it and a Runegate attack before that one, that's such a big turn where if they just take all of it, they will lose 2 plus 8 plus 4 plus 6 then 20 life, and they will have to banish a card, which is a huge swing of tempo. And if a deck doesn't have these big swing turns, you need a very consistent damage plan, maybe. But the way this deck works, I feel like you block out, attack with the Phantom Wraith, and try and set up a widespread annihilation turn with the Revelry Moonblood, with a Mauvrion Skies, maybe with a Phantom Wraith, or even a widespread rune before the widespread annihilation. If you can do that consistently in a game, you generate a lot of annoying tempo. And even if you get this combo off and you threaten 20 damage and they take 10, you can just consistently keep generating the 0 cost or 2 cost or 0. You can consistently keep generating the 0 attack 8 with the Runegate. Especially if you pitch deck into it as well, you become a very efficient end game deck. But you do have to set up something bigger in the late game, or you will have to try and fatigue out your opponent. And that's why I don't run the Carrion Husk, if you've been wondering. I feel like having the 1 Blood Depth doesn't go well with the general team of Runegate, where you block out and just present 6%, where you just block out and present 8 damage. You will have to set up the big combo turns, and on the off turns you're presenting 6 or 8 while blocking probably 9, and having Blood Depth does put you on the clock, especially with the Carrion Husk. And I feel like the Tunic or the new body piece it does generate less value, but it doesn't put you on the clock. So that's something to think about. Let's dive into some sideboard cards and some cards worth talking about, in my opinion. And some cards worth talking about. So first, my current sideboard are the Mana Conquerors, the Envelop in Darkness, Runic Reclamation, the Chains of Aphidus, if I pronounce it correctly, and these 3 and these 4. First off, CNC paired with the Pummel, very strong, can generate a lot of tempo. I'm debating about running it mainboard, because you generally are more of a defensive deck than an offensive deck, and CNC always demands blocks, well, most of the time, or it takes a card. So there could be a reason to run it mainboard, but for now I want to test it as a sideboard card into, for example, Rangers or the Assassins, maybe even against the Kane who wants to keep the Ada Wildfire in the arsenal. Just decks that don't like being disrupted in the arsenal, that's the decks I want to run the Command and Conquer against. But like I said, maybe if this becomes more of a control style deck or a mid-range style deck, I could see Command and Conquer going into the main board. I also have in the sideboard Envelop in Darkness. I think it's a good card. I think it does a lot of things that it basically does everything you want as a Vynnset. The only problem is that it costs 1 instead of 0, and Mauvrion Skies costs 0. So in my understanding of Vynnset, you generally don't want to pay for anything, because you can cheat out the Runegate attacks and most of your non-attacks are 0. So having to pay 1 is pretty steep. But you can pair it with a Tunic, or you can pair it with a blue to pitch into this one, but then you'll leave the 2 resources floating, so you might want to actually run another weapon. So maybe you go into Nebula Blade if you want to play Envelop in Darkness, but Envelop in Darkness doesn't give the Runegate attack go again. So using the 2 resources will be a struggle if you're going to pitch into Envelop in Darkness, but I do have a game plan for it where I pair the Envelop in Darkness with the Vexing Quell hand in a more tempo style game. So I feel like you won't be able to value trade every deck, and you might want to be more of a aggressive style deck or even more tempo based. And for those situations I want to test out bringing in the Envelop in Darkness and the Vexing Quell hand instead of the Grasp of the Arcanite, because with Vexing Quell hand you can more easily reach 3 or even 4 Runegate, 4 rune chance to Runegate a bigger attack, and also pressure them with the rune chance, which is harder to do with the main 64 cards I have in the deck. I also have the Scepter of Pain, which is an interesting card because it doesn't attack, so it allows you to stack rune chance. Maybe there's a very interesting build around playing a Scepter of Pain and just stacking rune chance until you get enough of them. I just put it in the sideboard to test it against certain matchups. You can technically pair this with the Envelop the Darkness, but you still need to find a way to give the Runegate attack go again, which you can do with a Captain's Call, for example. But then you'll get another deck where you need to draw into very specific hands, making it less consistent. So I feel like, looking at consistency, this is the more easy deck to build, and maybe there are still some builds which can utilize Scepter of Pain and into building more rune chance, for example. It will probably also be a card for UPF. There are also some cards that are... Ooh, the last card I have in... I also have Runic Reclamation in my sideboard. It's there just for the prisms and maybe for the Dromai if they run a aura. But it's mainly for the prisms. It being a 7 attack, which can pop a Herald. If you can attack with it, just pitching away the blue, attacking for 7, being able to destroy an aura. It's a very strong card against illusionists. And lastly, I have the Chains of Mephiles, if I pronounce that correctly. It's a blue, it blocks for 3. It can be very handy against Rangers, especially Lexi with the 3 of a kind. Maybe also against decks that run Art of War, just denying their draw. I do feel like playing them into a Ninja, for example, into Fi. It will be less strong because they are still allowed to play the cards. They just cannot use it for pitch. And with Rangers, if you go Tunic, 3 of a kind, you generally want to draw a blue with 2 red arrows, so you can fuel the arrows with the blue. And having you banish the blue, allowing you to not attack with it, hurts a lot. And of course, when I'm talking about it, you cannot load the arrows into the arsenal if they're banished, so you cannot use them to attack. So it looks more like a card against Rangers than against, for example, Ninjas, who can just play the 0 for 3 go again attacks that they get, that you banish when they Art of War them. There are also some cards that I've seen being run by people, or cards that I find interesting that need some testing. Bounding Demigon. I've seen people play Bounding Demigon. It's a 0 for 4 from a banished zone, but I'm not playing it because first it doesn't have Go Again, which you could create with Chane, but you cannot with Vynnset. And I do feel like the rune chants are very important to Runegate. And Bounding Demigon, using the first rune chant you banish, can be rough. You can of course go Mauvrion Skies into the Bounding Demigon, and if it hits, you get to generate rune chants, which you can Runegate, but that's very conditional. Just banishing to get the rune chant, finding a way to generate another rune chant, and attacking with Runegate attack feels like it has more of a natural play pattern than Bounding Demigon. Although the art looks really sick. Another card I've seen a lot of people play is Oath of the Arknight, which is... it feels like a worse Envelop the Darkness. I've seen a lot of people also playing Oath of the Arknight, which feels like a worse Envelop in Darkness because you have to pay 2. And granted, it doesn't really matter if you pay 1 or 2 because you'll generally pitch a blue and you will lose the 1 resource you have left over. Unless you play Rosetta Thorn, for example, which can be pretty hard. It also gives +3, it also creates a rune chant. It also has Go Again, but this one blocks 3 and Envelop in Darkness blocks 2, but it does cost 1 resource more. And I don't really see a play pattern where you get to pitch for this one and attack with the Runegate and do something afterwards where you can use the the extra resource. So I'm personally not running it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not seeing the synergy with the rest of the deck. I've also seen people run Rattlebones, and maybe I'm sounding like a broken record, but I do feel like Vynnset doesn't like to pitch, and especially with Rattlebones you want to banish something which has low cost, because Rattlebones costs 2. You can do some shenanigans with getting Go Again as an instant speed if you have dealt the arcane damage, which can be nice if you Runegate, but then you get back another Runegate and you still have to pay for that one as well. So you need to pair the Rattlebones with a blue and probably a tunic resource as well, and then you can only get back a 2 cost attack. Maybe there's something there, but it does feel like it's very clunky to pay for the Rattlebones and the attack you get back off the Rattlebones. I do see a world where you play something like a Swarming Gloomville, and if you play Swarming Gloomville, you get it back with the Rattlebones, and you can Swarming Gloomville and then attack with the flail or attack with another weapon you've chosen, which makes a lot more sense. So maybe there's another build that uses or utilizes Rattlebones very efficiently, but in this build I don't really see it working. Two interesting cards if you're going more of the defensive route, because you will probably be blocking with 2 or 3 cards from hand. You could run the Sigil of Suffering, dealing 1 arcane on their turn. They probably don't want to pitch, so it's 0 for 4. You deal the 1 arcane. Can be interesting to run if you're going more of a defensive route. If you cut out the Pummels and you don't run the CNCs, you could run Soothcliffe's Research Notes, which has Go Again. So if you pair this with, for example, a Envelop in Darkness or a Oath of the Arknight, you can use up 1 blue entirely and do the Runegate attack with a lot of rune chants. But I feel like this can be an interesting card if you run only Runeblade cards, allowing you to generate the 3 rune chants you need for every Runegate attack, basically, because you get the first of the banish and then you get the 3 of this one. So it might be an interesting card to run. And then we have Swarming Gloomville. I was trying it a few games. It does feel clunky because you create the first rune chant, so it does have Go Again, but you generally want to use the rune chant to Runegate. And if you attack with the Swarming Gloomville, you attack and you use the rune chant. And then you have to generate rune chants after attacking with Swarming Gloomville to attack with the Runegate attack, which feels really clunky. There's ways where you can just... I do feel like there's a way you can play it after you Runegate an attack, but then you need, for example, a Mauvrion Skies and the Swarming Gloomville. So you go banish an attack, get up to 2 rune chants, play the Swarming, banish an attack, go up to 2 rune chants, play the Mauvrion Skies, play the Runegate attack, then attack with the Swarming Gloomville, and then attack with the flail. That's a more go wide kind of turn, but it does feel like a lot of hoops you have to jump through for just 3 go again, because the other effects will generally not be active, especially not the last one, which you can do if you're a Viserai, where you can just generate 4 or 6 rune chants even before attacking with the Swarming Gloomveil, and then generating 8 after attacking with the Swarming Gloomveil, presenting 10 unblockable arcane damage, which is something Vynnset won't do. So the ceiling for Swarming Gloomveil is a lot lower, and using it has more niche cases. So I'm not seeing it currently, but maybe there's reason to play it, or there's a build that can utilize Swarming Gloomveil very effectively, but it goes against rune gates, I feel. So that's my first take on Vynnset. I'll be running the deck on Teleshard, trying out the cards and seeing if the cards in this deck will work. I do feel like it's a very interesting concept, being able to play off a 1-card hand, but there's also a challenge in not generating enough tempo, because you will be attacking for 8 most turns and blocking, so you will have to face the blunt force damage of all your opponents, and especially looking at something like a Lexi or a Katsu, it can be really rough to survive enough turns so the 7 or 8 you do each turn matters, especially because you cannot go wide, you basically cannot go tall. Maybe there's a reason to play more defense reactions, maybe there's a reason to play a lot of defense reactions and banishing the rune gates, only the 3 rune gates or the 4 rune gates, and just turtling it out using 1 in 4 turns to attack, which seems really bad, because interacting with your opponent generally is a better idea than just reacting to your opponent. The only deck that could really do it was Oldhim, but he had a lot more defensive capabilities thanks to Rampart. I'll be looking at the ways people are building Vynnset, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you the next time. Let's talk about equipment. Hey, let's talk about the helmet and greaves. Let's talk about the chest and the gloves, also a weapon and the grammar too.